The laughter cut through the air like shattered glass, sharp and unexpected. James Turner stood frozen at the counter, his weathered hands gripping his wallet as the group of men in tactical gear snickered behind him. "You want what kind of gun?" "For protection," one of them repeated, mockery dripping from every word. "Maybe start with something you can actually handle, like pepper spray." But what happened next would silence everyone in that shop, and change James's life forever. Hey everyone, if this story resonates with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to see more content that celebrates everyday heroes and the moments that transform ordinary lives. Your support means everything to this channel. The morning had begun like any other for James, waking before dawn, making breakfast for his daughter Maddie, and dropping her off at school with a kiss on the forehead and their special handshake. At 42, James had been doing this routine alone for 6 years, ever since his wife Emily's car accident left him a widower and single father to their then 8-year-old daughter. "Have a good day, pumpkin," he called as Maddie bounded up the school steps, her backpack bouncing with each step. "You too, Dad," she shouted back, her smile the mirror image of her mother's. James sat in his truck for a moment longer than necessary, watching until she disappeared through the double doors. The neighborhood had changed in recent years. What was once a quiet suburb of Millfield had seen 3 break-ins on their street alone in the past month. Last night, James had been startled awake by what sounded like someone testing his back door handle. When he'd checked, no one was there, but the incident left him shaken. After years of resisting, he'd finally made the decision. Today, he would buy a gun. The bell above the door of Patriot Arms jingled as James entered. The shop smelled of gun oil and leather. Glass cases lined the walls, filled with firearms of various sizes. James felt immediately out of place in his faded work shirt and paint-splattered jeans, remnants from his job as a house painter. A group of men stood near the shooting range entrance, all wearing matching vests with patches and tactical pants. They looked like they belonged, James did not. "Can I help you?" asked a young clerk with a name tag reading, Tyler. "Yes, I'm looking for something for home defense," James said, his voice quieter than he intended. "I've never owned a gun before." That's when the first chuckle came from behind him. "Never owned a gun before," one of the men repeated loudly. "Well, ain't that something?" James felt his neck grow hot but continued speaking to Tyler. "I have a 14-year-old daughter at home. We've had some suspicious activity in our neighborhood, and I want to be prepared." "Daddy's scared of the boogeyman," another man whispered, loud enough for James to hear. Tyler, to his credit, maintained his professionalism. "We have several options that would be suitable for home defense." "Have you had any firearms training?" "No, but I'm willing to learn," James replied, increasingly uncomfortable as the snickering behind him continued. "Maybe he should start with a water gun," someone suggested, and the group erupted in laughter. James felt his hands begin to shake. This was a mistake. He should leave, find another way to protect Maddie. As he was about to turn away, the back door of the shop opened. A tall man with salt and pepper hair and the posture of someone who had spent years in uniform stepped out. The name, Frank Reynolds, was embroidered on his shirt, with owner beneath it. The laughter died immediately. Frank surveyed the room, his eyes landing on James, then shifting to the group of men who had suddenly found great interest in examining a display of hunting knives. "Is there a problem here?" Frank asked, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone used to being obeyed. "No sir," Tyler replied. "I was just helping this gentleman with home defense options." Frank nodded and approached James, extending his hand. "Frank Reynolds. I own this establishment." "James Turner," James replied, shaking his hand firmly despite his nervousness. Frank studied him for a moment. "First-time gun buyer?" "Yes, sir." "And what brings you in today, Mr. Turner?" James explained about the break-ins, the incident last night, and his responsibility as Maddie's only parent. As he spoke, Frank's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "You're a single father?" Frank asked. "Yes, for 6 years now. My wife passed away." Frank was silent for a moment. Then he turned to the group of men who had been laughing earlier. "Gentlemen, do you know who this man is?" They looked confused, shaking their heads. Frank turned back to James. "Sir, it's an honor to meet you. Being a single parent is the hardest job there is. You're doing the work of 2 people, and that deserves respect, not ridicule." The shop fell silent. James felt a lump form in his throat. "Now," Frank continued, "I'd be happy to help you personally. Not only with selecting the right firearm but also with proper training. Safety comes first, especially with a child in the home." Over the next hour, Frank patiently explained different options, focusing on ease of use, reliability, and safety features. He showed James how to check if a gun was loaded, how to handle it safely, and discussed secure storage options that would keep Maddie safe while still allowing James quick access in an emergency. "I run a basic firearms safety course every Saturday morning," Frank said as he rang up James's purchase, a simple, reliable handgun that felt manageable in James's hands. "I'd like you to attend, free of charge. Bring Maddie too, if you're comfortable with that. She should understand the seriousness of having this in your home." "I couldn't accept that," James protested. "I insist," Frank replied. "It's important." As James was preparing to leave, one of the men who had laughed earlier approached hesitantly. "Sir," he said to James, "I owe you an apology. That was disrespectful of me and my friends. We should know better." James nodded, accepting the apology with grace. Outside in the parking lot, Frank walked James to his truck. "Can I ask you something?" James said. "Why did you say it was an honor to meet me? You don't know me." Frank leaned against the truck, looking out at the horizon before answering. 15 years ago, I was deployed overseas. My wife was left alone with our 2 boys. 6 months into my tour, she was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer." Frank paused, collecting himself. "By the time I got home on emergency leave, she had weeks left. After she passed, I had to learn how to be both mother and father to my sons while dealing with my own grief." He turned to James. "So when I see a man doing what you're doing, putting his child first, facing his fears, learning new skills to keep her safe, yes, I consider it an honor to meet you. Because I know exactly how hard that road is." James felt tears prick at his eyes. For 6 years, he had felt so alone in his struggle, invisible in his daily battles. "Thank you," he managed to say. "No, thank you," Frank replied. "For reminding me why I opened this place. It wasn't just to sell guns. It was to help good people protect what matters most." The following Saturday, James and Maddie arrived at Patriot Arms for the safety course. To James's surprise, the shop was full, not just with the usual customers, but with several single parents, both fathers and mothers, all there for Frank's class. Word got around, Frank explained with a small smile. "Turns out there are a lot of people in your situation who've been too intimidated to come in." As the class began, James watched Maddie listening intently to Frank's instructions. For the first time in years, he felt something shift inside him, a weight lifting. He wasn't alone anymore. He had found not just a way to protect his daughter, but a community that understood his struggles. 3 months later, James stood confidently at the Patriot Arms shooting range, hitting his target with precision. The same men who had laughed at him that first day now nodded respectfully when he entered the shop. 2 of them had even joined the single-parent safety network that Frank had started, inspired by James's story. The night of James's first visit to the gun shop had indeed changed his life, but not because he purchased a firearm. It changed because someone had seen his invisible struggle and honored it. Frank had recognized the quiet heroism in James's daily life and reflected it back to him when he needed it most. And when the attempted break-in happened again 2 months later, James was prepared. He didn't even need to fire the gun, the sound of him chambering around sent the would-be intruder running. The police caught him 3 blocks away, and it turned out he was responsible for the string of burglaries in the neighborhood. That night, as James tucked Maddie into bed, she looked up at him with serious eyes. "Dad," she said, "I'm really proud of you." "For scaring off that guy?" James asked. Maddie shook her head. "No. For being brave enough to learn something new. For taking care of us all by yourself all these years." James sat on the edge of her bed, overcome with emotion. "I'm not by myself anymore," he said. "We have people now." As he turned off her light and closed her door, James thought about how one moment of recognition, "Sir, it's an honor," had rippled outward, creating connections where there had been isolation, respect where there had been mockery, and community where there had been loneliness. Sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is walk into a room where they don't belong and ask for help. And sometimes, the most powerful thing another person can do is simply acknowledge that bravery. The next day, James received a text from Frank with a photo attached. It showed the wall behind the counter at Patriot Arms, where Frank had hung a new sign. "Respect every journey. Honor every sacrifice." Beneath it was a smaller frame containing the first target James had ever shot, with his name and the date written across the top. He had become visible.